What would you think if I told you that some requests are not requests at all? They are warnings dressed as questions, veils masking manipulation, subtle fractures in the foundation of your sovereignty. There are people sometimes charming, sometimes broken, sometimes so desperate they almost convince you it's love, who will ask you for things that seem harmless, even flattering. But beneath the surface of their words coils an ancient pattern, one that Jung understood well, the unconscious attempt to devour, to drain, to bind you not through chains, but through quiet psychological contracts you never consciously signed. And you, woman listening now, how many times have you handed over pieces of your peace disguised as compromise? How often have you heard those 5 simple requests that, if obeyed, unravel the sanctity of your soul thread by thread? You feel it in your body, even if your mind has not yet named it, the tightening in your chest, the quiet recoil of your intuition, the exhaustion that follows every interaction with them. They come in many forms: lovers, friends, even family, bearing requests that sound sweet but reek of erosion. Carl Jung warned of this, of the projections others cast upon you when they refuse their own shadow. When they cannot sit with their own unmet needs, they seek to make you responsible for carrying them. The unhealed man who asks you to shrink your light so he may shine brighter. The insecure friend who asks you to dull your boundaries so they may overstep. The charming manipulator who asks you to betray your truth so they may feel safe in their illusion. Each of these requests, spoken or implied, is a theft, subtle, cumulative, deadly to the authentic self. And yet, many women, shaped by generations of compliance, bend beneath the weight of these demands, believing it is kindness, believing it is love, believing it is their duty to accommodate. But let it be clear, love does not ask for your diminishment. Respect does not require your self-betrayal. Real connection does not feed on your fracture. There is an archetypal danger hidden in the psychology of people who ask for these 5 things. They are not all villains. Most are simply unconscious, trapped within the labyrinth of their own unmet wounds. But unconsciousness is not harmless. An unhealed soul, when close to yours, becomes an unspoken predator, not through violence, but through the gradual corrosion of your boundaries, your worth, your voice. And yet, you hold the power to sever that cycle, to stand rooted in the sanctity of your own energy, to become so discerning, so fiercely self-possessed that no request, no manipulation, no disguised demand can breach your inner temple. The woman who walks this path, the path of radical self-awareness, shadow integration, and unwavering sovereignty, becomes untouchable in the most dangerous, most beautiful way. She is not cold. She is not cruel. She is awake. She knows that to grant the wrong request is to abandon the architecture of her own becoming. She refuses to participate in the quiet assassination of her truth. And when they ask, when they couch their need in sweet language or trembling vulnerability, she listens not to their words, but to the energy beneath them, because beneath every manipulative request is a lesson. Will you betray yourself to suit another, or will you rise whole, unapologetic, sovereign? The woman who rises learns to read these unspoken contracts not with bitterness, but with clarity. She understands that every interaction holds the potential for initiation, a test of her self-worth disguised as affection, a trial of her boundaries, veiled as connection. This is not paranoia. It is discernment sharpened by experience, refined through the fire of shadow work, birthed from walking the long, quiet path of Individuation. Jung spoke often of projections, how those who refuse to confront their own unconscious will cast their wounds onto others, demanding that you carry them, fix them, soothe them. But the woman who knows her worth no longer plays the healer at the expense of her soul. She recognizes the dangerous seduction of being needed, of being chosen, of being the savior in someone else's story, and she rejects it, not out of cruelty, but out of reverence for her own becoming. they will ask you to abandon yourself in small ways at first. It never begins with grand betrayals. It starts subtly. Can you stay silent when I cross your boundary? Can you dim your ambition so I feel bigger? Can you tolerate my chaos because I refuse to heal? The requests slip through the cracks. A politeness hidden behind their charm, their neediness, their trembling confession that they're just not ready to face themselves. But readiness is not your responsibility. You are not the scaffold for their avoidance. You are not the canvas for their unfinished self-portrait. You are not the safe house for their unclaimed shadow. Some women, unaware of these dynamics, pour themselves empty trying to meet these requests, convinced it is love. But love that demands your fragmentation is not love. It is dependency masquerading as devotion. True connection does not require the sacrifice of your voice, your light, your truth. You, woman listening now, were not designed to contort for approval, to dilute for belonging, to fracture for proximity. You were designed to expand, to radiate, to choose. And choosing requires saying no fiercely, unapologetically, often alone. It requires the courage to disappoint those who believed your softness could be leveraged, your empathy exploited, your boundaries eroded. It is not your duty to be agreeable at the expense of your authenticity. It is not your calling to be palatable for those unwilling to meet you in your fullness. Some people will ask for access to your energy, your body, your time, not to nurture it, but to siphon it. They will dress their request in romance, in friendship, in desperation, but the undercurrent remains. Will you abandon yourself so I can avoid myself? The woman who sees through this veil is dangerous because she cannot be manipulated by half-truths, by projections, by veiled demands. She becomes the sovereign gatekeeper of her life, choosing only those who honor, not devour, her essence. She listens not to their words, but to the resonance beneath them, and she walks away when necessary, knowing that preservation of self is not selfishness. It is sacred. There is a particular stillness that surrounds a woman who refuses to abandon herself. It unsettles the unhealed. It disrupts those who have learned to extract worth from the compliant, the fragmented, the desperate. Because when you no longer barter your boundaries for belonging, you become unreadable to those who depend on your fracture to feel whole. They will call you distant, cold, too much, not enough. They will label your refusal as arrogance, your discernment as cruelty, your silence as punishment. But in truth, it is the reflection of their own discomfort, the unease that arises when their familiar patterns no longer ensnare. You, when their subtle demands disintegrate under the weight of your unapologetic presence. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious seeks wholeness, but when left unexamined, it manipulates instead. The people who ask for these 5 dangerous things often do so unconsciously, blind to their own avoidance, shackled to their unresolved wounds. But unconsciousness is never an excuse for violation, and your sovereignty is not up for negotiation. The first request is always small, seemingly innocent. It slips in under the guise of intimacy. Can you just lower your standards, just this once? It masquerades as vulnerability. Can you hold all my pain, even when I refuse to hold my own? It whispers in moments of connection. Can you make yourself smaller, so I don't have to confront how intimidated I am by your power? And if you concede once, they will ask again. Not because they are evil, but because they are human, and humans, left unchecked, will always reach for comfort over growth. But you, woman listening now, you were not born to carry the unclaimed burdens of others. You were not sculpted to be the emotional dumping ground for those unwilling to rise. Abandonment of self is the most insidious erosion. It doesn't happen in grand, explosive betrayals. It crumbles piece by piece. The silencing of your voice to avoid conflict, the dimming of your ambition to preserve their ego, the tolerating of chaos to avoid their rejection. But each concession costs you fragments of your truth, and fragmented women do not change the world. It is in refusal that your power crystallizes. in the unflinching no, in the unwavering standard, in the quiet, steady reclamation of every boundary they hoped you would abandon. And it is in that steadfastness that your soul expands, no longer fragmented for approval, no longer diluted for false love. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And how true it is. The imagined suffering of disappointing others keeps women small, compliant, starving for scraps of validation. But the real suffering comes later, when you wake to the realization that you have contorted so long for. Love that you no longer recognize yourself. You are not here to be digestible. You are not here to be pleasing at your own expense. You are here to be whole, dangerous, undeniable. And that begins when you refuse the requests that devour your worth under the guise of connection. The world is not accustomed to women who refuse to fracture for love. It recoils from women who stand unbending in the face of sweetly packaged demands. It stumbles before the ones who do not barter their softness for survival. And so, when you begin to say no, not with rage, but with quiet certainty, the ground beneath certain people trembles. This trembling is the unraveling of their illusions, the realization that their charm, their woundedness, their subtle control no longer grants them access to your energy. It is a confrontation with their own reflection, their shadow projected outward, now met with the impenetrable wall of your boundaries. And yet, this is where your deepest growth begins. In the discomfort of their disappointment, in the echo of their withdrawal, in the storm that follows your refusal to abandon yourself. Because behind every manipulative request is a test. Will you betray your evolution to appease another's stagnation? Will you dilute your authenticity to soothe their insecurity? Will you fracture for proximity, or will you rise whole? Unattainable? Sovereign? The woman who rises is not cruel, but she is unshakable. She recognizes the danger and entertains those who ask her to shrink, to dim, to bear the emotional weight they refuse to carry. These are not casual requests. They are silent contracts designed to siphon your power. Carl Jung warned of such dynamics, the unconscious collusions that unfold between the unhealed and the unaware. But awareness is your greatest weapon. See now how manipulation can wear the face of love, how dependency masquerades as connection, how your empathy can be weaponized if left unchecked. You understand the subtle erosion that occurs when you grant access to those who speak in riddles of need, but offer nothing in return but depletion. And so you choose differently. You learn to read energy over words, to watch actions over promises, to prioritize resonance over desperation. You become the gatekeeper of your own sanctuary, guarding your time, your body, your soul with the sacred discernment born of self-respect. This journey is not without loss. Some will leave when you no longer contort to fit their wounds. Some will rage when you refuse their quiet demands for self-abandonment. But those who depart were never aligned with your becoming, only with your fragmentation. The woman who stays loyal to her evolution is not for everyone. And that is her power. She does not dilute to be palatable. She does not fracture to be loved. She does not apologize for the standards that protect her peace. There will be those who rise to meet her, men, women, souls forged in the same fires of self-awareness, shadow work, and healing. These connections require no sacrifice of self. They demand no erosion of boundaries. They honor the fullness of your being because they have honored the fullness within themselves, and until they arrive, you remain sovereign, whole in your solitude, dangerous in your discernment, untouchable in your authenticity. The woman who becomes untouchable is not hardened. She is refined, tempered by betrayal, awakened by the slow unraveling of illusions. Sharpened by every moment, she chose herself over the seductive pull of approval. Her strength is not born of bitterness, but of sacred remembrance, the quiet, unwavering knowledge that she is no one's project, no one's savior, no one's emotional caretaker. She has witnessed the patterns, the quiet coercions, the disguised demands of those who ask for her to abandon herself. And now she knows, when someone requests the erosion of your boundaries, they are not offering love, they are offering a slow death of your spirit. Jung spoke of the shadow, the dark, unconscious fragments within each of us, buried beneath shame, fear, and unmet wounds. The ones who ask for your self-betrayal have not met their own shadow. Instead, they outsource their discomfort, weaving it into their requests, masking dysfunction as need, projection as affection, manipulation as vulnerability, and the unawakened woman, conditioned to believe love is sacrifice, compliance, diminishment, she accepts. But the awakened woman, the one tempered by silence, by abstinence, by reflection, she refuses. Not to punish, not to wound, but to protect the sacred architecture of her becoming. Her refusal disrupts the old dynamics, the cycles of codependency, the subtle extraction of energy disguised as intimacy, the unspoken expectation that she should fracture to be loved. And so, they call her difficult, guarded, too much. They label her boundaries as walls, her discernment as detachment, her power as arrogance. But she knows better. She knows that love without self-respect is bondage, that intimacy without boundaries is consumption. That connection built on the erosion of the self is not connection. It is spiritual starvation. And so, she does not apologize for her standards. She does not contort to soothe fragile egos. She does not barter her light for false belonging. She chooses, with clarity, with reverence, with the understanding that her energy is a sacred currency not everyone deserves access to. She recognizes the 5 dangerous requests for what they are, veiled attempts to siphon her power, invitations to fracture her authenticity, subtle manipulations wrapped in the illusion of care. And she denies them, fiercely, lovingly, consistently. In that denial, her soul expands, her energy sharpens. Her presence commands respect without words. The unhealed recoil. The conscious rise to meet her. And within that dance, she remains, untethered, unapologetic, rooted in the undeniable truth of her worth. She has tasted the power of her own sovereignty, and there is no returning to smallness. It is in this state, sovereign, awake, undiluted, that the woman becomes dangerous, not because she seeks to harm, but because she cannot be seduced by illusions. The world does not easily hold space for women like this. It has been carved by generations of expectation, where female compliance was currency and the fracturing of self was mistaken for love. But she no longer mistakes self-betrayal for affection. She knows the cost of abandoning her truth, the quiet death of authenticity, the exhaustion that follows every concession, the slow erosion of the soul disguised as keeping the peace. Those days are gone. She stands now at the crossroads of all her past selves. The fragments of the woman she once was, the version that shrank to avoid rejection, the version that tolerated to feel worthy, the version that diluted her brilliance. To soothe another's insecurity, they stand behind her like silent ghosts. And she thanks them, for they taught her what compromise costs, what silence steals, what fracture feels like in the marrow of the bones. But she does not return to them. Carl Jung understood that the path to individuation, to the wholeness of the self, requires confrontation. You must meet your own shadow, your patterns, your ache for external validation. And in meeting them, you reclaim every fragment of your being once scattered across the terrain of other people's approval. And so, when someone comes cloaked in charm, veiled in vulnerability, their requests laced with quiet expectations, she listens, not to their words, but to the energy beneath them. She feels the undercurrent. Is this love, or is this extraction? Is this connection, or is this consumption? She has become fluent in the language of energy. The body reveals what the mouth conceals, the tightening in the chest, the pull. In the gut, the whisper of intuition that says, they are asking you to fracture. And where she once would have sought her boundaries, silenced her knowing, traded fragments of herself for proximity, now she chooses differently. She says no without apology. She walks away without explanation. She protects the temple of Her energy, for she understands that preservation is not selfish. It is sacred. There is no virtue in tolerating those who chip away at your authenticity. There is no nobility in shrinking so others feel tall. There is no love where your wholeness is unwelcome, and so she remains dangerous to those who have yet to meet themselves, untouchable to those who project their wounds onto her, unavailable to those who ask for her fracture disguised as affection. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.